This is the first of a set of videos which will allow you to quickly learn the Bewegungskrieg or Lightning War Red Storm set of micro-armour figure gaming rules. All credits for the rules go to its designer, Andrew Stevenson. In this introductory video, I'll provide a brief overview of the rules and some of its salient features. A quick note, LWRS is the original set of rules printed and made available by Andrew Stevenson. Bewegungskrieg is simply a reformatted version of these same rules with some additional optional rules to fill any potential gaps. Lightning War Red Storm was one of the earliest set of rules which used the scale of one element equals a company. Corps Commander used a half-company scale. Great battles of World War II had a very board game feel to it and was not common outside of Canada. Schwerpunkt was a very basic set of rules. LWRS, of which the first edition came out by 2008, if not earlier, was almost certainly the state-of-the-art when it came out. It was complete, playable and gained traction in the UK during the 2009 to 2013 period. The last version was published in July 2013 and is available on the LWRS IO group site. Its only real problem was a lack of army lists and scenarios, but otherwise represented a surprisingly complete set of rules which could cover almost any aspect of warfare from 1915 to 2015. This is something that even professionally published rules lack. Bewegungskrieg is a reformatted version of the LWRS rules. It is identical to LWRS apart from a single game system optional rule and a number of optional rules designed to fill gaps such as with weather, terrain, victory conditions and similar auxiliary rules. The primary objective of this publication or video was to make the rules more acceptable and easy to learn. A host of supporting documents are included with this set of rules and all are available on the Bewegungskrieg IO group site. For all practical purposes, it is identical to the original LWRS and this training video can be used to learn the original rules as well as the reformat version. All credits for the rules go to its designer, Andrew Stevenson. Part of my attempt to reformat LWRS, which I call Bewegungskrieg, was the creation of a host of additional supporting documents. One document, which this video is based on, is what I call Part 5 Examples. This provides an exhaustive range of examples of play. My intention in the rules was to remove all diagrams and examples and things like that in the reformatted version because that simply made the rules too big and large, and place all the examples in a separate document with very large print and lots of diagrams to assist players in learning the rules. Now it can also be used as a reference document while playing, such as how do I launch an air attack or something of this nature, and you can quickly identify the section within the examples document because it's actually ordered and sorted and organised in exactly the same manner as the original LWRS rules. This document is available on the Bewegungskrieg IO group site. Within the reformatted version of Bewegungskrieg, I've written what I call editor's notes. Just a quick caveat, the editor's notes are not written by the designer of LWRS and written by the editor of the Bewegungskrieg rewrite, which was in turn based on material found in the older Yahoo Group's website and general comments on the internet. As a result, many assumptions could be wrong, thus take this information with a grain of salt. But I think it generally and accurately describes the development and the thought processes which go behind Lightning War Red Storm. The copy of the rules I'm working with is version 3.1 dated 26th of July 2013. As the Yahoo group was created on the 15th of October 2001, I have to presume the first version was made available on that date. I'm also assuming that it was version 1 of the Lightning War rules. It's clear the rules were originally divided into a World War II and a modern version, and based on the way the rules were written, my guess is the World War II version came out first. It's possible these rules existed in some form before this date, but as with other commercially published rules, I can only work with the dates I can access in a public forum such as the internet. Before we go into the game system itself, it's always useful to attempt to understand why these rules were developed and what was the mission statement behind them. A good way of understanding this is by looking at other rules, both available on the internet or published during this period. The interesting point is that this was one of the first one base equals one company scale game systems. The other rules which use this scale, such as the Great Battles of World War II, came out in 1995, so it predates LWRS. However, I am unfamiliar with these rules, and I suspect it's more focused on or has a greater board game feel than a micro-armour feel. I found it hard to find these set of rules, Great Battles of World War II, or anyone playing with the rules. In summary, I have to assume that these rules were not common enough to be known outside of Canada. Apart from the Great Battles of World War II, the closest game system to LWRS is Corps Commander game system, last published back in 1988. Yet even these rules used a mixed scale, with company often consisting of two bases. We have to go forward to 2002 to find a similar game system of which I am familiar with and which is commonly available and played, which is Panzerkorps. Apart from the scale, there are a number of unique features in the game system. The use of a large number of D6 dice to replace a complex combat results table is one such interesting feature. While not uncommon in board gaming, this was less common in the micro-armour world of 2001. Today, rules such as FFT use this mechanism, but as FFT was published a decade later, this was certainly not the source of this concept. It should be noted that this was the opposite of rules such as Corps Commander, which use very few 10-sided dice on very complex combat results tables. A major issue with Corps Commander is its reliance on a few die rolls and complex tables, so it seems the mass die system was a reaction to this issue. Regardless, the combat results table is very simple. 4 plus gets a hit, 5 plus gets a save. There are a number of modifiers to consider which mainly affect the number of die rolls you can spin to hit or save. Overall, a very playable system. The other interesting feature was the use of initiative to determine movement order. This was used in Corps Commander, but LWRS took this concept and greatly expanded it. Basically, each battle group, which basically means regiment or brigade, determines its initiative with a die roll. The higher the value, the greater choice of move orders it has. It was possible for a battle group to move when this gave it the greatest advantage. This feature is the same as Corps Commander, but the added spice was the movement order was based on battle groups and not players. Another difference was both players moved during the same movement phase. In practice, the main advantage selecting move order was to occupy territory enemy forces retreated from before the enemy could reoccupy that territory. If an attacker, it also allowed you to launch a second attack immediately after the first attack, thus preventing the defender from bringing up reinforcements and making a major breakthrough. A significant effort was made to simplify visibility or observation. In many ways I feel this effort went too far. However, I must admit it works well. My only issue was moving and firing elements had the same visibility as elements which did not move or fire. On the other hand, it did prevent gamey situations from arising. If influenced by Corps Commander, I am guessing this may have been a reaction against the incredibly detailed observation rules in Corps Commander, which quite frankly took a lot of brain power to master and use. The fire combat system was simple and effective. A player first had to determine how many dice to throw, which in some complex situations was a bit of an effort. Then the dice were thrown with a 4 or greater resulting in a hit. Then the opposing player would attempt to save, which did require looking up a modifiers table. In most cases, a player could look at the situation and quickly determine how many dice to throw. Even for saves, in most cases, the modifiers were obvious. There was a lot of die throwing, but this was not really an issue and preferable to constantly referencing complex tables. The real benefit of this system was the simplicity of the pseudo tables and the save rolls, which were only required if a hit was achieved. This greatly sped up play. The other interesting point about fire combat was the creation of 4 basic armour and gun values. They were either referred to as 1 to 4 or light to extreme. All armour and gun values were determined based on the weapons available at that period. So in 1940, a 37mm gun would be considered as medium. but in 1941 it would be considered as light. This was a beautifully simple system, but which did make it hard to create army lists with points values. The benefit was players did not need to cross-reference guns and armour values during the game. However, in practice, this was only possible if both players were very familiar with the elements being used. The result was players still needed an element value cheat sheet in order to speed up play. Apart from this, the maximum 4 grades reduced the possible combinations, so experienced players could benefit greatly from this system. The air rules had a real Corps Commander feel to them, but much simpler and far more playable. The one major positive difference was the lack of air-to-air combat. There was a simple soaking off system which achieved the objective and avoided unnecessary die rolls. The issue of casualties was neatly resolved by the use of quality check die rolls, where a 1 resulted in a casualty, which resulted in the aircraft being unavailable for the remainder of the current day. However, the largest step forward was the way air support was brought in, through the use of quality die rolls. This avoided complex and messy orders and record keeping, while never allowing a player the certainty air support would arrive when the player wanted it. The one area I was most impressed with was the quality system for calling down artillery and air support. This avoided a massive amount of rules, as can be seen in Corps Commander. My only concern was the way divisional artillery could be massively concentrated at a single point, which is a common tactic in the game. If we look at Corps Commander, this is also possible, but in the later Corps Commander, Bruce modified the rules to make it very difficult. In Corps Commander, this tactic required many elements to act as observers, which required a lot of effort. In Corps Commander, I call this the super observer of death tactic, but in LWRS, there was no observer, so I have to just call this Thor's mighty artillery fist of death tactic. However, the supply rules do act as a moderator to the tactic, but it's still a highly effective way of punching through the enemy's front line. The air support rules also lent themselves to this, but as the amount of air support is much less, it's not very visible. Just a quick note to this, after redoing all my scenarios, the amount of indirect artillery fire was greatly reduced. My force mixes were too large originally. So as long as you stay within the force mixes in my scenarios, this is not an issue in any way, shape or form, and the rules work beautifully. The supply rules are also very interesting. Each player has a number of supply points which can be expended conducting indirect fire and double moves. It's very easy to run out of supply if you're the attacker, so this has to be managed carefully. This is a very refreshing, as it does limit the power of indirect fire, which is surprisingly historical, while remaining as simple as possible. This is in real contrast to rules such as Corps Commander, where, for example, indirect fire elements had to consider supply even when doing normal attack. In LWRS, supply points are only used when you do something unusual, which meant that the rules and monitoring was dramatically reduced. I can really see a major focus in these rules around getting it as simple and playable as possible while retaining sufficient accuracy and historical detail. There seems to be some magic rule for micro-armour rules. A game which has a maximum of 100 elements and covers 12 game turns can easily be completed in a day, which is around about 4 to 6 hours. While these rules are simple, it does not seem to make much difference in the length required to play. It's all about the number of elements on the playing area and the number of game turns. These rules allow you to play a real day within 4 to 6 hours and 2 days within a day. It's interesting about the complexity thing, and it's quite true. If the rules are more complex and both players are very experienced, they can still play a game as rapidly as simple rules. This is something which really did surprise me. However, the key factor here is experienced players. Most players do not start as experienced, so the one big benefit of LWRS is that even if your knowledge of the rules were quite minimum, you can still whip through a game in a reasonable time frame. I remember the first time I played Corps Commander, which I now know absolutely backwards. It took me about 90 minutes just to get through one movement fire combat phase as we were desperately cross-referencing tables, rules and trying to work out what was possible and what was not. In LWRS, I had a similar first game, And yes, I got a lot of things wrong, but by golly, we certainly did flow through the game quite a bit. And I must admit, we weren't fast, but we still got through half a game in around about 3 hours. So these rules are good for new players and players who want to get into the hobby quickly without spending an enormous amount of time cross-referencing lots and lots of rules. This completes my overview video. You can download the rules and supporting material from the IO group site. Search for Bewegungskrieg or use the URL in this image. Additional URLs will be found in the description of the video where you found this. Denken Sie daran, immer für Heimatland zu kämpfen.